And I'm back! Hello everyone, I'm Beckman, and welcome to another episode of Beckman's Breakdown, the show where I take a look at all of the BWF World Tour events from Super 500 all the way up to the majors. And within each episode, I give my opinion on things that went down, memorable matches, how things happened, why they happened, and absolutely everything else or anything else that comes to my mind. This week's episode is going to be slightly different to the ones in before, and you can probably gather that from the title of the episode, and that's because I've been on holiday. I only got back yesterday for 3 weeks in Indonesia, that I wasn't in a position to do a regular episode on the Japan Open, which was held 2 weeks ago now. So I felt that it was best that when I got back, I would do a double episode looking at both the Japan Open Super 750 and the China Open Super 1000. Because obviously I'll be looking at two tournaments across 2 weeks, and I don't want this episode to go on for 2 hours or 3 hours. I want to try to keep it to roughly the same length of time as my usual episodes, which is roughly around an hour. I will be condensing my thoughts. I'll only be talking about the things that I think are the most important, or the things that caught my eye the most. That does mean that there will be certain topics, I'm sure plenty of them, that I'll leave out. I have tried to cover as much of those in the Q&A section, which will come at the end. But if there's anything you think I've majorly left out, then please do add them in the comment section. You can also ask further questions there, and as always, I'll do my best to answer them. So before I get on with the episode, obviously I am wearing the Beckman's Breakdown merchandise. If you like how it looks and you want to buy one, it would certainly help the channel, as well as it would actually help the guy that's behind that company, who is a young Dutch aspiring badminton player. So you'd be helping two people within the badminton community, and I also think it looks pretty cool. So if you want to get any of this kit, I have hoodies, shirts, there's hats and water bottles as well. You can have a big logo like this one or a small one, then just click the link in the description below. There's still 20% off for the first 20 customers, and it includes free worldwide shipping. So that's the introduction out of the way. Let's get right into the first topic in this week's episode of Beckman's Breakdown. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is the return of two players, more specifically two singles players from Indonesia, as both these players have been out for quite some time with injuries and illness. Those two players are Anthony Ginting, a men's singles player, and Gregoria Mariska Tunjung, a women's singles player. Starting with Anthony Ginting, he's actually been out for about 6 months with a shoulder injury, out for such a long time that he had applied for a protected ranking, similar to the situation of players like Zheng in the past and Li Zijia. But Tunjung, unlike Li Zijia, actually made a return at the Japan Open, and it wasn't the best of returns for him. Now, having said that, that sounds like I'm going to be quite harsh and critical of his play. That isn't the case. It's just the fact that in both the tournaments, both in Japan and China, he lost in the first round. Now, both those results came with different reactions to them. In Japan, where he lost to Kodo Naraoka, one of the world's best players, I think he was seeded at the event, the result was seen as kind of expected. You know, Naraoka's a fantastic player, he's been in the world final, he's one of the best in the world, and so for Ginting to come back after 6 months having not played an international competitive match, I don't think anyone was really expecting him to win or even possibly do particularly well. However, at the China Open the following week, I can't remember who he was set to face, but I think it might have been Pranoy, but he withdrew, so he was replaced by Brian Yang. Now, Brian Yang is another fantastic player, but he's not as high in the world as someone like Kodo Naraoka, and so with Ginting losing to him, there was a lot of people that were kind of frustrated, and they was already going, is Ginting ever going to get back to his previous top form? Is this result kind of a sign of things to come, etc., etc.? For me, that is an incredibly harsh assessment of the match, but I'll get to that match in a second. I want to kind of take it back, obviously, to the Japan Open. I watched his match versus Naraoka, and I was actually pretty impressed. Ginting was showing all the kind of signs of things of the way he used to play. Obviously, very fast, very attacking, great deceptive skills from the net, and it was all on display in that match against Naraoka. It was quite a nice contrast of styles because Ginting is the more attacking and explosive and creative player, and Naraoka, whilst he can do all those things, is a player that's a bit more known for a war of attrition, will have the long rallies. So there was quite a nice contrast going in. For me, with Ginting, like I said, he showed all of those things, but they just weren't consistent enough. Something that that should be expected from a player that hasn't played competitively for 6 months. He would go through some good runs of things, but he would also miss some stuff. You know, like just going out wide. So he'd do his famous kind of fake net. It would go the net, or it'd be just out, just a little bit too often, that he wasn't able to apply enough pressure to Naraoka or to win. But for me, the signs were good because he was showing all these things, and with just a little bit more time, and if those margins start to come in, he starts to get his feel back, then obviously those things would be very effective. It's hard to really explain. I mean, I obviously never played to the level of these guys, but I played at an international level, and I can remember just taking, say, a month off, for injury, or just taking some time away. And when you come back, even if you've been doing practice matches, when it comes to that tournament, it has that added pressure. Just being on those tournament courts, the shuttle flies even differently, probably to where he trains at Palatnas, where you're in a kind of a smaller hall, and now you go to an arena, the shuttle will fly differently. So if you haven't been in that situation for 6 months in Ginting's case, then I'm not surprised that the net feels a little bit like you haven't quite got your judgment going, or when you're hitting these shots, it doesn't quite feel right off the racket. Those things will come with more matches, more tournament play. So yeah, I wasn't surprised that mistakes like that happened. What was really good, and what Ginting said after his match versus Naraoka, was that he was extremely happy and just really pleased to be back playing. And you could see that. He was smiling, he was enjoying it, he was fist pumping, he was really wanting to win, obviously, but that's just a really positive thing. So the fact that he just feels really grateful to be back, for me, is a great sign. Combine that with the kind of things that he was trying to do on court for his future. Now, against Brian Yang, I think the reason why there was some frustration from what I saw was that Ginting won the opening game playing similar stuff, but then it seemed that in the second and third he went off the boil and started to play. It almost looked too different between the first game and the second and third. So I think a lot of people were like, that's where the frustration, combined with the fact that obviously Brian Yang just isn't as highly ranked or respected by badminton fans quite as much as someone like Kodai Naraoka. Now, for me, what I will say is I think it just continues on from what I said earlier, is that I think he needs just to have far more time. I think it would be really good for someone like Ginting if he is to drop his level down and play maybe a couple of 300s. I don't know what his plan is. Maybe even playing a couple of 100s, try and win a tournament just to really get himself back in. Like Steen Pedersen always says, if you're a player and you get used to hearing 20 match point 16 and you're the one holding the shuttle, it feels really, really good. And it doesn't matter whether you do that at the highest level or even one of the lowest levels, it's still a great feeling. And when you're coming back, having that feeling more and more is only going to build confidence, because muscle memory is a thing. Ginting was one of the very best in the world. He's an absolutely phenomenal player, and so if he just kind of plays more and more, regardless of the level, eventually his former level will come back, so long as we give it time. Now, I'm sounding like I won't be criticising Ginting at all. That isn't the case. No one is adverse to having some criticism thrown against them, but I think in terms of Ginting, if he keeps trying to play with the same attitude that he showed in Japan and China, keeps trying to do the things that I saw him do, if he keeps doing that for the remainder of this year, and the results, even if they aren't brilliant, but he keeps doing that, then for me, I will keep going, just allow him to have a little bit more time. Everyone varies. I don't know the extent of that shoulder injury, whether it's fully fit. It must be pretty much ready if he's come back, especially after investing so much time away from the courts to get it healthy. So yeah, no, in terms of criticism towards Ginting, or to really kind of analyse his game fully, that probably won't come till next year. Hopefully sooner, because I hope that he is able to play enough tournaments for the remainder of the season and get his game going, and maybe get a few fortunate draws to get further in, or play, like I said, a few lower tournaments and just get his groove back. It would be absolutely fantastic to see. Someone did ask me whether Ginting will ever come back to his highest level, and I think he definitely can, and I still think he's got some fantastic performances left in him. I think what will help, although that you could argue with Christie having gone independent, so he wouldn't have him as a training partner, but Indonesia have some really incredibly talented junior players or early senior players, like Alwi Farhan's one, and another Ubaidillah, I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. He recently just won the Asia Junior Championships, and he's been doing really well in some of the lower senior tournaments as well. So there's players there that are going to be pushing up and trying to take Ginting's spot, and hopefully that can really push him to kind of come back. But yeah, no, it wasn't, in terms of result-wise, a great return for Ginting, but it seems that he was very happy and grateful to be back, and I thought I saw some good early signs despite the up and down nature of it. But that's Ginting in a nutshell, even when he's playing really well. So let's give him more time, yeah, I think I'll move on to Tunjung, the other player. So Tunjung was out for 2 months, but hers was an injury, it was illness. I think it was a vertigo that she was suffering. It's good to see that she's able to come back and play, because I absolutely love Tunjung. She's such a graceful and beautiful player to watch, and I think she's done tremendously well over the last couple of years to really raise her level. I felt that she was a world junior champion and had all this promise and looked like the player that would be the next Indonesian superstar in women's singles, and she kind of pushed on a bit and then had a bit of wasn't able to kind of progress it on. And then over the last, I'd say, maybe 2 to 3 years, we've seen her start to show more of a promise, and she kind of went from a player that was in the 10 to 20 range to a top 8 player, and a player that can get to the finals and the latter stages of the big tournaments. So I really hope that she's able to come back fully in these 2 tournaments. In Japan, she also lost in the first round to Riko Gunji, another former world junior champion. And obviously this result was a surprise and took everyone, although not many people were expecting much from Tunjung after such a long period off, a bit like Ginting. But I think people, when they saw the draw, thought, okay, Riko Gunji is a good player, but Tunjung should still be able to win, or at least, have a great game. But the match ended quite one-sided. Riko did actually have an incredibly good tournament. She got all the way to the semi-finals, playing some beautiful attacking badminton. And I think, as a little side note, I will talk about her a little later, but she's also showing kind of why she was a world junior champion and why people were thinking that she could be one of Japan's next top superstars. But yes, like I said, I think in that match, Tunjung did look a little off pace, not helped by the fact that Riko was playing at a phenomenally high pace throughout that tournament, throughout that week in Japan. And I just think Tunjung was just taken a little bit by surprise. In China, though, she was able to get to the quarterfinals, so that's a pretty solid result for her. And in the quarterfinals, she lost to Han Yue, a player who actually reached the final. So again, she lost to another player that was having a great week. I didn't actually watch too much of her match against Han Yue. I can't remember why I didn't, but for me, what stood out for it is something that I saw afterwards, which was quite a lovely moment between the 2 players, and that was that when Han Yue was leaving the court after having won, she noticed that Tunjung was sitting in the seat by the court, looking rather distressed and clearly not particularly well, and Han Yue asked if she was okay, and I think she called for the tournament doctor to come in and, check on her, because she was looking, and in the picture she looks incredibly flushed out. So that's a little bit of a shame, because obviously she was playing much better to get to the quarters, but obviously wasn't in a position to really play to her full capacity. I do hope that it was just a bug. I don't know what illness it was, whether it was just, maybe a bit of food poisoning, or just, you can pick up illnesses when you're traveling. It's very easy. Your immune system can get quite compromised, or you're in a hotel room where the AC might be slightly too high, whatever it may be. I just hope it isn't something linked to her vertigo from before, not a relapse in that respect. I hope it was just a bug that she could get over quite quickly and come back, because I don't want Tunjung to be out for much longer, and I'm sure many of her fans don't too, because she is a fantastic player, and she adds not just a lovely style to the women's singles, but also more variety, because the women's singles has gone backwards a little bit in respect to the fact that the diversity that was been there for the last, I don't know, since 2013 up until 2021, etc., 2022, had been just absolutely rich in diversity and so many top players that could all win. It's now become, Seung and 3 Chinese players. So having a player like Tunjung in there, or obviously another player like Akane Yamaguchi, adds that diversity and it brings a little bit more excitement. And her style is different to all the other women's singles players out there. So I really hope that she's able to come back. And just like I said with Ginting, let's give her a little bit more time, allow her to find her game, refine her form, and if she does, she is a fantastic player, and I really hope that she's able to get back to her best. Okay, so the next player I want to talk about is Alex Lanier from France, because if we think back to a year ago at the Japan Open in 2024, Lanier made an absolute breakthrough by winning the whole tournament, defeating a number of the world's best players en route, players like Li Jia, Shi Yu Qi, Cho Tien-chen, etc. It was a real mixture of world-class players. Now, of course, many people put next to that result that it was because it was so close to having been so not long after the Paris Olympics that many of the players that he beat were obviously in a post-Olympic slump, not quite sure of whether they wanted to continue, or maybe they just hadn't really been training long because they took so much time off after the Paris Olympics, or their training. Obviously, when you build up for such a big event like the Olympics, you're inevitably going to have quite a crash afterwards. Not many players go straight from doing well or very badly at an Olympics and then suddenly just carry that on immediately. That's very, very rare. So it kind of was I wouldn't say it was a doubt against Lanier, but obviously a lot of people kind of said, yeah, it was a great result, what a fantastic talent this young player is, but the top players that were playing were far from their best. So the fact that obviously now in 2025 he was able to do it once more. He wasn't able to win, he did lose to Shi Yu Qi in the final, but making the final was a fantastic result because everyone that came into this tournament, it's the first tournament in this leg. There's been a little break since the Asian leg before, and so everyone was coming in super ready, and players that were coming in were wanting to do well in the build-up for the China Open the next week. But what I really want to talk about when it comes to Alex is the difference between him last year and this year. So between the Japan Open of last year and this year, obviously he's backed up a number of times the talent and the potential that he has. A lot of people after the last year in Japan were like, I was one of these people. It was like, what a fantastic result. This kid is a real talent. But can he push on? Is this going to be a one and done? Is he going to do this, have this fantastic high at the Japan Open, and then, be a player that's on the world tour and will play the top tier tournaments, but never really has another result, or very rarely, one of those players you see once in a while. And he's kind of proved himself to be someone who's going to be a major factor in every single tournament that he plays. Every tournament that he plays in. Just trying to think off the top of my head some of his results. I know 2 key ones since then has been that he reached the semi-final of the All England this year and really should have got to the final. He was, that match against Li Chao, he probably should have won that one. But regardless, still a semi-final at a Super 1000 at the All England, and he also became France's first European champion. Although many people, again, look at that and say, well, Anderson and Victor Axelsen weren't playing, but still he beat Christo Popov in the final, and he played brilliantly and showed again the kind of talent he has. He's obviously got other results as well, but I'm not just going to sit here and list them. But the crux of what I'm trying to say is that he's gone on from that initial Japan Open result from last year and has continued to push on and on. He's now even in a position where he's not just a contender, he's like one of the top 8 seeds, and I think he's going to be seeded in the top 8 for the World Championships on home soil. That's going to be pretty exciting to see how he performs there. But back to the differences between this year and last year. Now, I think the first thing that's quite noticeable for me, and I know a lot of people are immediately going to go, oh, you're pointing out the obvious, or this isn't the only thing that Alex Lanier is good at, but it is, for me, one of his biggest strengths, and that is his strength and power. That was something that was noticeable last year, and it's something that I've seen any other player that talks about him talks about. I know Antonsen mentioned how physical he is. I said last year that, he's incredibly strong, the legs, incredibly athletic, and his finger and forehand power is one of the best in the world. The power he can generate with very little swing is absolutely incredible, and that's only gone from a very strong point of his game to even stronger. Physically, if you watch him from last year to this year, he looks absolutely, like he's really been working hard in the gym and working on his physical side. On top of this, I know for a fact, because I've spoken to his coach, Kęstutis Navickas, and he said that one of the things that Alex had been working on since that Japan Open was to improve his attack. And it's definitely shown. I think for me, from last year, if I'm remembering correctly, his forehand corner had a couple of good winning shots. But I think one of the things I actually mentioned last year was that his accuracy or variety in his attack needed that little bit more to it, a bit more quality. He's able to win some points a little more efficiently, and he's certainly gone away and done that. He's developed a number of weapons, both from the forehand corner and the round the head. His round the head cross court smash, or slicey kind of smash, or whatever you want to call it, is brilliant. And I think that's one of the shots that all top men's singles players must possess. It's one of, say, Shi Yu Qi's best shots, Antonsen's best shots. Victor's very good at that. All top men's singles players can do that kind of reverse smash from around the head, and Alex is another example. In fact, for someone, he's not short, but he can actually get and hit it very, very steeply and very, very sharply. Another area I think he's really improved on is his front court, and I don't mean that just in terms of skills or his net shots, but he pushes forward very well. There were many times where he's almost stepping up. Forgot to turn the audio off on my laptop, and it's just sent me a notification. So what I was saying was very good at pushing forward, and he pushes forward at just the right time. What I mean by that is he steps up the court very, very well because he is so physically strong. But then any little moment or opportunity where he can come in and push at his opponent or come in and do something, he's doing that far more than he was compared to last year. I've also noticed something, I think this comes from the fact that he's been training with him quite a lot, but he has been training with Antonsen quite a lot, and one of Antonsen's best ways of nullifying speed is that he does a lot of delays with his step and lunge. So most people, or when you get taught, you hit and land at the same time, kind of that rhythm, lunge, hit, and obviously as you watch top players, they will then delay that. They will lunge, step, and then hit, and all that kind of stuff. And that's something that Antonsen does almost all the time. He's constantly trying to disrupt an opponent's split step rhythm or footwork rhythm by doing this all the time. And you can see, well, I could see in Japan, and I've seen it beforehand, that Alex is also starting to do that quite well. That couples with how fast he can pounce onto the shots, it just means whenever he comes forward, you're never quite sure what he's going to do. And add to this that he would play with great variation with the same technique, whether he would spin it, push it flat, or push it slightly over you, straight cross. He's got absolutely everything, and then add to that with the delays that he's got, it just means that whenever he's in an okay position or a good position at the front court, that's going to make your legs work incredibly hard. And he picks the right one to do 9 times out of 10. So his ability to do that is second to none, but his shot choice when it comes to that area is also pretty damn good. So for me, overall, those are the main ones, but he's obviously generally just developed a lot of key areas that you need, those small percentages in all areas that are going to make the difference between being a good player and a great player, a player who can get to the quarters or a player that can win these big tournaments. And I think lastly, what I'll finish on is that obviously he's developed his mental strength as well. He did show last year some of that he has that ability. If we remember rightly, the comeback, was it in the first game against Cho Chien Chen? I can't remember exactly, but just that mental strength, it's always been quite a strong point, but he's obviously clearly developed that because he's gone from last year, who would have been like the underdog, And this year he probably went in as one of the favourites. You know, he was seeded, he'd won it before, so obviously he likes the venue. So this year the kind of situation for him, how he had to deal with it psychologically, would have been far different, and he dealt with it absolutely brilliantly. So I think it just is a culmination. This is a nice little example of Japan last year and this year, but it shows to me the development that he's had over this year, and that's really he's only had one, if we count that, really it's his first full year on at this level consistently. And I think one thing, actually, the last thing I'll say that's always been surprising is that usually when you get players that are quite physical like him and quite young, they end up playing quite a lot of tournaments. If I remember rightly, like the Popov's played almost every tournament going, whereas Alex has been very selective. There are some times where I've seen him missing like a 500 or even maybe a 750, and I've kind of gone, why isn't he playing those events as well? Surely he should be utilising every opportunity that he's got to get as much experience. He's quite new to this, but clearly that shows that France and his coaches and himself have a great deal of, like, a great long-term plan, and they're trying to kind of not burn him out, and and also have belief that when he does go to these tournaments he can do really well. And it kind of, for me, it's whenever I see him in a tournament, I know that he's going to that tournament with that real intention to win. Sometimes, like I said, when players are in that situation, they play lots and lots of tournaments. I think sometimes they do it just to get experience. They're not actually going there to necessarily win. That would be a nice bonus. But with Alex, ever since he's been on the World Tour, maybe it's because he started with a win in Japan, but I felt that he's always picked the tournaments when he wants to play it because he wants to win it. Now that, again, like I said, saying that out loud sounds obvious, but I hope you understand where I'm coming from. But yeah, no, I want to end this section by just saying what an incredible Japan Open. Obviously in China the following week he did lose to his compatriot Toma Junior Popov in 3 games. Not too unexpected. Toma's a fantastic player. Those two will know each other inside out most likely, and it's always difficult after going from 1 week doing really well to restart again. Is quite tricky, and so yeah, I'm not too surprised, but I don't think that really should take away from what he did in Japan or what he's done so far, nor should it take away from his chances at the home World Championships. Okay, so moving on, the next section I want to talk about 3 players, and they are the 3 players that I think going into these 2 tournaments were players that a lot of people had their eye on, and that's for the main reason that, not necessarily in Japan, although people were quite keen to see how they would do because it would give an indication of how they could do in China. But that fact that in China they had an opportunity to do the Super Slam or the Super Grand Slam or whatever you want to call it, basically winning all 4 of the Super 1000s in the same calendar year. And those 3 players are all from Korea, and it's Seung in the women's singles and Seung and Kim Won-ho in the men's doubles. So yeah, no, I think everyone, and myself included, were very excited to see how those players would do. And I think the way I'm going to kind of further break down this section is I'm going to talk about Seung first, because there's quite a few interesting things, and then I'm going to talk about Seung and Kim Won-ho. So for me, with Seung in Japan, she was absolutely on another planet. No one came even close to beating her. She put in some absolutely dominant performances. Most notably for me was her quarterfinal win over Chen Yufei, where, in all honesty, Chen Yufei had absolutely no chance. Seung controlled every department. She was proactive, even when clearing and rallying. Every shot had a purpose. And in the second set, Chen Yufei, to me, looked like a shrinking violet and simply couldn't find any area that was working. The game was 16-9, and that makes it sound like the first game was quite close, but in all honesty, that first game could have also been to 9 as well. There was quite a fair few misjudgments on the back line by Seung. In all honesty, Chen Yufei was never in the match. Now, after watching that match, I was sitting ready to, I don't know, go out for dinner, I think, and something popped up on my Facebook feed, and it was about Seung, and it was from basically a news article talking about how, following the last Super 1000 in Indonesia, where Seung did win, that Park Ju-bong, the new head coach, had expressed concerns over the way Seung was playing. he felt that the way that players were starting to tackle Seung was to start attacking her and going for it against her right from the beginning, whereas in the past players were a little bit more apprehensive. Maybe they were worried that they would tire out because Seung's obviously retrieval and defensive skills and neutralizing skills are so strong that if you go out sprinting, it's a bit like going out on a full sprint like Usain Bolt, but you got to run a marathon. Like, you ain't gonna last long. So, but a lot of people were starting to change that, maybe seeing that this was the way to go, because otherwise, if you just draw it out, you're also going to be in a bad position where A, you're not going to win, and B, Seung physically is the strongest women's singles player, so you're still going to come unstuck at the end. And I think Park Ju-bong saw that to counter this, Seung will need to be that little bit faster, that little bit more proactive, and he felt that footwork training was the most important. Sessions where she can get 1 centimetre more out of a jump, etc., then if she can be more aggressive from the start, then it nullifies that tactic. Basically, I think Park Ju-bong was saying that Seung's style of play, which is to kind of tire players out over a long period, isn't as effective when you come up against a player that can play very good, fast, attacking badminton from the start, unsettle Seung, and basically not make the game as physical. So he felt that if Seung could also develop that skill, that would kind of counter that. And Park Ju-bong has been around a long time and obviously was a fantastic player. And after watching the rest of Seung's matches in Japan, I was like, damn man, he is right. Absolutely spot on. That's exactly what Seung did, and no one, like I said, had a chance. She was incredibly dominant, and I think after winning in Japan, everyone was like, yep, Seung is going to do the Super Slam. Really, outside of anything major happening, who's going to stop her? She beat Wang Ziyi easily in the final. It was just, there wasn't really anyone that was pushing her in Japan. But fast forward to China, and I watched her opening match, and she came out with quite heavy taping on her right knee, and immediately I was like, this might be an issue, because we know that Seung's had injury issues in the past with her knee, and she had no taping in Japan, or very little. I don't think she had any taping. If she did, and it was skin coloured, I didn't notice. But it was very noticeable in China. She had it heavily strapped in her first round against Michelle Lee. And then in the second round, it was slightly less. So I was thinking, okay, maybe it was just, after playing a full tournament, just the first match in China, she was a little bit unsure. It was going better, but then the taping came back up again in a quarter-final, where again she beat Chen Yufei, and that was a much closer affair than Japan. But then against Han Yue in the semi-final, she actually withdrew halfway through the second game. Now, I think the reasons for this was, I think I've seen a few things, no, I didn't write anything down, was that I think with the Korean coaches, and Seung have obviously one eye on the bigger tournament, which is the World Championships, and obviously she's going to want to defend her crown, and she'd been having some issues, I think, a little bit throughout Japan, and obviously a bit of fatigue as well, and so they felt it was best not to aggravate it further, not to make it any worse. So it is good that they're thinking long term. I think Korea of old would have just got her to carry on and fight through. I think if it was just up to Seung, she probably would have said, I'll keep fighting like she did in the past. But I think Park Ju-bong most likely was in her ear going, no, we need to look at you much more long term. I know it's devastating. I mean, Seung was crying in her interview afterwards, because I think she desperately wanted to win all 4 Super 1000s this year. And obviously to withdraw in any tournament in front of fans, etc., is always never an easy decision. But I think for me in this case, it's definitely the right one, because there's a few weeks, if not a month, until the World Championships. Hopefully that's enough time to let things calm down and then obviously rebuild your training up. It is quite devastating. Like I said, she did cry in her interview, but she also said, and I love the confidence in her, that she was like, I know I'll have another opportunity to win all 4 Super 1000s. So she definitely still hasn't lost her confidence that she can come back from this, and it's not going to be a long-term issue, and I generally hope that it isn't. For me, it's just great that the Korean coaches, I think it's most likely Park Ju-bong, are looking at Seung in a much more long-term thing and not just going for the glory, because she could have easily just tried to fight on and found a way to win still in China, but it would have been at the detriment further down the line. Now, the last thing before I move on to the men's doubles is that I don't think in that semi-final she drew against Han Yue. And it must be noted, even though Seung clearly was not at 100%, but Han Yue won the first game and was 11-6 up, so she was winning. It's not like Seung withdrew winning, and I think we shouldn't take anything away from how Han Yue played. She was playing fantastically in that match. Seung wasn't going to let her, wasn't going to roll over, and I think had Han Yue not played as well, and Seung might have won the first game, she might have tried to kind of fight on and win and then maybe withdrawn in the final. I don't know. But like I said, I just wanted to, before I move on to the next two, Kim and So, I just wanted to say that I don't think we should take away anything from Han Yue. It's not technically a win over Seung, but it shows that she has the game, she has the attacking weapons, we know she does, to trouble Seung. And Seung's going to know that if she's not fully fit against any of these Chinese girls, or any of the other players, someone like Akane Yamaguchi, that she can be defeated by them. So, moving on to Kim Won-ho and Seo Seung-jae, very similar to Seung. In Japan, they were absolutely amazing. They were really good throughout the week. They only dropped one game and looked very, very strong. They were showing all the things that had got them, this result also made them world number ones. And they were showing all those capabilities, the ability to be very strong in either formation, whether Seo Seung-jae's at the back or Kim Won-ho's at the back, very solid in defence. They were looking more, especially Kim Won-ho, very, very relaxed. They looked so confident and calm. I was kind of like watching them going, I feel like I'm watching, although their style is different, I'm watching like Park Ju-bong and Kim Moon-soo, or I'm watching Kim Dong-moon and Ra Kyung-min, the kind of, not Ra Kyung-min, so Kim Dong-moon and Ha Tae-kwon, the kind of Korean pairs that were really, really good and just had this kind of air of confidence about them that they know how really good they are. Lee Young-dae and Jung Jae-sung, or Lee Young-dae and Yoon Sung were another pair that were like that. And so they've kind of, for me, they showed those signs that they could be another one of those Korean pairs that they're now world number ones. They could hold that ranking for quite some time. And yes, they're going to lose here and there, but 90% of the time they're going to win their matches, or they're just basically going to be incredibly difficult to beat. And again, like Seung after Japan, they obviously headed into China with the opportunity to do the Super Slam, and again, most people were kind of thinking, who's going to stop them? I think, even if I remember rightly, Steen Pedersen spoke about how the hall in the China Open, I think this was before the tournament got in, because it ended up not quite being this way, but the China Open hall being big and sometimes playing maybe a little slower, a little less drifty, would suit the Koreans even more than, say, the Indonesia Open, especially, where they still won. As it turned out, the hall was quite drifty and quite awkward to play, especially in the men's doubles discipline, and that might have had a factor in the fact that in the quarterfinals, when they came up against Fajar, Alfian and Muhammad Fikri of Indonesia, a complete scratch pairing, that they completely came unstuck and were defeated incredibly easily, basically. That result was surprising on a number of levels. Firstly, that Kim and So actually lost. They haven't lost many times this year, but also the fact that they lost to a scratch pairing. But if you look a little deeper than that, maybe the result isn't too surprising, because I think off the top of my head, Kim and So have lost, 5 times this year? And 3 of those times have been to Fikri. And each of those times, Fikri's played with a different partner. Was it the Asia Championships? Was it Fikri playing with Daniel Martin? And then at the Sudirman Cup, Fikri playing with Maulana. And now, obviously, in the China Open, Fikri playing with Fajar Alfian. In that match, in all honesty, how the Indonesians won, and it's, the Indonesians had an absolutely brilliant week. They ended up winning the whole tournament, but I'll get to that in a second. This match actually leads on to that. But what was absolutely fantastic from the Indonesians was how well they both played, but especially Fajar Alfian in that quarterfinal. His front court play was absolutely ridiculous. You couldn't get through him at the front. And then not just that he read the game so well from the front, but his variety. He'd like obviously come in and kill it, or he'd like go the right way, he'd turn the angle, he'd say play a block. It was all sorts of things, and he was doing that from all areas of the court. It wasn't just say when Fikri's attacking behind him, but he might like push a defence in and step forward, and he'd read the next situation absolutely brilliantly. And I think what really this might lead, because a few people ask me, what is Kim and So's weakness? And for me, I think the best way I can sum it up was they were exposed in that front court area by Alfian and Fikri. And the best way to explain it is that in the round before, when Kim and So played Takura Hoki and Yugo Kobayashi, Hoki and Kobayashi are former world champions, but they weren't able to dominate or control the front court. They weren't able to get the front court at all. So Kim and So are playing so much from above the net, or even if they were slightly second, they were never from too much of a stressed position, so they could lift out quite easily and get into their defensive formation. What Alfian and Fikri did so well was, like I said, be able to finish points from the front court, but they challenged the net very well. They always had the Korean second best, and not just that, but they had them second best and having to play shots with not much time. They took away time from them so brilliantly, and that was partly due to the shot quality, but also the variety. Fikri did this as well, but Alfian did it brilliantly. He'd hit one or two like fast interceptions, and then he'd just change up a soft one. So they got the Koreans to step back, then he played one in front of them. So by the time the Koreans got there, because they can get there, but they're playing that lift from near the floor and not with much time. So they're blind, not blindly, but they have to just react. They haven't got much time to think about where their opponents are. If you're lifting from, say, a half decent position, you can kind of watch your opponent and maybe hit away from them, or you can see what they're trying to do. But when you're in a low position and it's there and you haven't got much time, you can't have time to really glance at them. It's very difficult. And so you end up more times than not playing into your opponent's hands. And, Alfian and Fikri did that in that match absolutely brilliantly, and they carried that through the whole tournament. I think in the second game, was it like 12-2 against Kim and So, but then in the semi-finals and the finals, they could have beaten both their opponents in single digits. It was absolutely amazing how well they played. Like I said, I'll get to those a little bit more. But yeah, no, the Koreans, so yeah, overall, Seung and Kim Won-ho and Seung Jae were unable to do the Super Slam, but both for different reasons. Seung with her injury, and Kim and So coming up against an incredibly well-playing Fikri and Alfian. So I think moving on, I'm now going to kind of put that to one side, carrying on with Fikri and Alfian, talking about them, because obviously they won the whole tournament, which was, and I want to say this out from the start, a great result for Indonesia, because they haven't been having a good time on the World Tour. I think I saw, and I think this goes for all disciplines, but this was the first win at a tournament of Super 500 and above for something like 7 months, almost 8 months, which is pretty insane for a country with the history and the level of player that Indonesia has. That is just, that statistic actually blew my mind. The fact that it came from a scratch pairing as well just makes it all the more remarkable. But the reason Alfian and Fikri are playing together is because Alfian's former partner, or regular partner, Ardianto, is spending time with his family as his wife has just given birth, and Fikri's regular partner, Daniel Martin, is recovering from knee surgery. So I think the coaches felt that they didn't want Alfian and Fikri to just be training. They wanted them to keep competitive, so they thought, well, why not partner them together? And what a stroke of luck it was that actually it turned out to be very, very successful. Even in Japan, they only just lost in the quarterfinals to, I think it was Gosefei and Nuazudin, when it was like 22-20 or 21-19 in the third. It was a really fantastic game. They showed they are capable. It shows to me that the China Open isn't just a fluke result. They actually are a pair that can do really well in all the tournaments. Now, I think the big question... before I get to that big question, in terms of what they did really well, obviously people were a bit like, how are they doing this? Because both players are what you'd call front court players, and Indonesian players tend to have a rear court player and a front court player. Now, I've spoken about this at length in previous ones, that I think the day and age of an out-and-out front and rear court player are kind of over in men's doubles, or in doubles in general. I think you need to be quite diverse or adaptable. Kim Won-ho and Seung Jae are brilliant examples of this, and I think we're seeing that from a lot of other pairs, that when they've strengthened, each pair has strengthened themselves individually in their slightly weaker situation, that it's usually garnered some great success. Now, in terms of Alfian and Fikri, they are two front court players, and that was where the main difference was made. And I think it was slightly helped by the fact that I think the conditions in this China Open were quite drifty and difficult, so there wasn't many opportunities to kind of go over. You had to go through, which obviously I think Steen Pedersen said it doesn't matter if you haven't got a rear court player when you can't get it through the front court player. But even in a hall, even if a higher lift or lifting high is more of an option, I think Fikri and Alfian's rear court play is still pretty damn good. And they actually showed, neither of them have got the hardest hit, but they haven't got weak hits either. And they played like they did from the front court with a lot of variation. Alfian was hitting a lot of, he's got this really nice straight slice from kind of the round the head corner where he comes right on top of it and it comes down very steeply. I saw him hit some beautiful cross smashes from the round the head situation, and Fikri was doing the same. So although their rear court might not be out and out power, like a classic rear court player like a Liang Wei-kang or a Daniel Martin, they played with a lot of variation, which feeds in again to what I said earlier about giving their opponents no rhythm or a lot less time to play with. So as a result, they're more likely to be able to play the shot that you're looking for, so you can read the situation a lot more. And that's exactly what happened. In all honesty, Fikri and Alfian were kind of playing some daddies style badminton. If we look at the daddies when they were in the end of their career, they were both very good from both situations, but because of their age, they didn't have the best overhead attack, not as well as it was when they were younger, yet they were still extremely successful because they were so good at creating opportunities to make the game awkward, to have a lot of variety, to find the gaps, to nullify speed. And Alfian and Fikri did that, but on top of that, when they needed to inject speed, because they're still young and fast, they could do that as well. They had absolutely everything covered. Now, what this does lead to, and what's been quite an interesting debate afterwards, is that a lot of people are thinking, well, they won the China Open. This is Indonesia's first title at this level for so long. Obviously, there's been a bit of a title drought. Should these two be a pair? Should the Indonesian coaches split them up in their other partnerships and have Alfian and Fikri as a full-time pair? Now, for me, I think obviously, your initial reaction is like, well, they played so well in Japan and they won in China that, yeah, why not? That could be absolutely brilliant. But I think there needs to be a little bit of caveat, and also it needs to be said that whilst this could very well, if say they were to be a full-time pair, this could be the start of something great. That's exactly how Kim Won-ho and Seung Jae started the year. They won their first tournament, and obviously they stuck together, and look what's happened to them. They're now world number ones within 7 months. So what's to say that Alfian and Fikri couldn't do that? But the flip side to that is that one win doesn't mean that things should change necessarily. I understand why a lot of people think they should. I've already spoken about that. But we look at these two players individually. They're both really, really good. And this week they had a fantastic week. Both of them were seeing the shuttle like it was a beach ball. The conditions helped them. And also, I think, because they were scratch pairing, all the other pairs didn't really know what to expect from them. There wouldn't have been much video of them to analyse and to come up with solutions on how to counter them. And so I think a lot of those things attributed to them to winning. This isn't me trying to take away from the win, but just trying to say that with the way they were playing, if their former partners, say with Alfian, if Ardianto also had a good week, and say Daniel Martin was fully fit and he had a good week, weeks that we all know they're both capable of, those two pairs, if they were in opposite halves, could, with the way that Alfian and Fikri were playing, could have reached the final, could have made actually an all-Indonesian final. So yeah, I think the question around should they be a pair, it's a difficult one to answer. I think a lot of people were reacting to this win going, they should be. It'd be absolutely brilliant. You know, we've had Indonesia, and like I said, haven't had any winners for so long. Finally they get one, so why would you want to stop that? You know, keep them together and see what they can do. You know, it might be the birth of a super pair, and so why would you want to throw that away? I completely understand that, but you know, what I just said is just looking at the other side of that coin. It's going to be obviously an interesting thing. I'm sure the Indonesian coaches are probably discussing. I can imagine, I think obviously Ardianto, I'm not sure about Martin's recovery. I don't think he'll be ready in time for the Worlds. Don't think so. But Ardianto obviously will, because he's not injured, he's just taking time off to be with his wife. So I would be surprised if Alfian and Ardianto don't play together at the World Championships. But after those Worlds, maybe then we might see some changes. I know Indonesia don't change their pairs all too often, but I guess we'll just have to see on that one. I'll pass that question over to you because it is really interesting. Do you think that Fikri and Alfian should be a pair? Yes or no? I'd love to hear both sides of that question of your opinion. So yeah, let me know. Let's move on to the next section. Okay, so this section I just want to run through, as you can see from the title, that it was a great tournament, or a great two tournaments, for quite a few players. Now, I'm not going to go into absolute detail because there's quite a lot, but I want to start off with a player that I've mentioned already, and that's Riko Gunji. She reached the semi-finals in Japan. She's a former world champion, but I think she has been struggling over the last few years with injury issues. But I think those injury issues have kind of subsided, and she's been on a steady rise over the last year or two. I think she played a lot of lower tournaments, something that I said earlier in this video that someone like Ginting should do, and I think that's built her confidence. And the way that she played was absolutely brilliant, very attacking, very fast, and I really hope that this will be a breakthrough result for her, something to give her belief to push on. It would be really good for Japan. They have a number of players, but obviously at the moment their top two are Yamaguchi and Miyazaki. So if obviously the way Riko Gunji played, she could easily be up at the level of Miyazaki already, I think. And then, you know, she's still very young, she could push on. That would be absolutely brilliant for Japan, and it would obviously really strengthen them for the Uber Cup. You know, they're doubles players, as we know. There's something about one of their doubles pairs in the women's discipline coming up a little later in the video, but they obviously have a number of really strong ones. So they could actually be in a position, genuinely, it would be difficult to take out, say, China or even take out Korea, but you know, a player like Riko Gunji really making her push on and showing the kind of talent that won her that World Juniors would really strengthen Japan. Next is Ong Yusin and Teo Yi. Two quarterfinals they got in Japan and China. I think they've been really struggling as of late. Not many wins, a lot of first round losses. So it was great to see them reaching quarterfinal stages and playing some really good badminton. In Japan, it did become a little bit of a joke that Ong Yusin was doing well because he had the home crowd on his side. And I say that because obviously he's Malaysian, but his wife recently married to Aya Ohori, who was a former Japanese player who retired last year. So obviously being almost an honorary Japanese team member and getting a lot of support, maybe that helped him. But it wasn't just in Japan, they also played very well in China. And I do enjoy watching this pair. There's a bit of an old school vibe about them. But I think the real reason I really enjoy them is Teo is just really incredibly creative and always a delight to watch. I think whenever I watch him, I just always have a smile on my face. It just makes the game look really, really easy, and he just tries stuff, and you know, sometimes it doesn't work, but he's just a joy to watch, to be honest with you. Next, back to a women's singles player and another junior, and that's Unnati Hooda of India. Unnati is a 17-year-old from India. You know, I think she's been touted. She's been like kind of doing really well and winning senior titles since she was like 13 or 14, and so has been on this kind of radar for the last 3 or 4 years that she's alongside a number of others, that she could be the next Sindhu or Saina Nehwal. And you know, she's always done really well at those lower tournaments, but when it comes to the slightly higher ones, or some of the top players, she has kind of not really shown what she's capable of. Earlier in the year, she got to the semis of the Taipei Open, which was a great result. But here in China, the Super 1000, she reached the quarters, and in the second round scored a huge win over someone who's probably a huge idol to her, PV Sindhu. I didn't watch much of her matches, but I have seen her before. She's very unorthodox. Not the most aesthetically pleasing player to watch, but then I would probably say the vast majority of Indian players kind of fit that bill. But where most Indian players do excel is they always have a really good fighting spirit, and most of the time they're actually tactically very astute. Saina Nehwal was probably the best example of that when it comes to Indian players, able to kind of really figure out and place the shuttle in the right spot and cover some of her weaknesses, namely her speed around the court was nowhere near kind of the players that she was able to beat the top players in her heyday. And Unnati's kind of got that similar thing. I do think that for her to move on, she does need to develop her defence and her footwork. If she can bring them on to near or on par with her attack, then I think she can make the next jump up. But it's going to be tough. But it is still quite exciting, and I think Indian fans should be quite excited about her prospects. Christo Popov next. Alex Lanier wasn't the only French player to do well. In fact, if you look across both the tournaments, Christo Popov probably did the best out of the French players as he reached the semi-finals in Japan and the quarter-finals in China. Now, I said this in my last breakdown, but I think Christo has definitely improved his smoothness within his footwork. He's always been very fast on his feet, but he's also been someone that has quite an unnaturally high split step. It's almost like he jumps a lot, and I always felt that was rather inefficient and could lead him into trouble against the better players that have the very sharp skills. And whilst it's still kind of there, I think it definitely has lessened, and his footwork and smoothness and all that kind of stuff has definitely got better. His footwork was always, I would say, nice, and so is his skills, but that split step always kind of bothered me, but it seems to be getting far more efficient, and I think he's showing that he's finding his feet more consistently at the high level. So, with results by Christo like this, obviously Alex Lanier and Thomas is also doing very well, and there's some French players below that are also very, very good and very talented. It's obviously really good for French badminton, but also for European badminton. I will say that it was a real shame in Japan that net fault happened to Popov. It was kind of another one of those classic situations where the badminton community cry out for VAR to kind of eradicate these decisions by the umpires that I'm not going to use this as an excuse as a reason to say the umpires are shit. Like most people say, I will defend the umpires as much as I can, but a VAR system would help in these situations because it would allow a second pair of eyes, something that that an umpire just doesn't have the ability to do. So it was a shame that his semi-final match ended that way, a bit of a low point, but that shouldn't take away from what was a fantastic 2 weeks for Christo Popov. Akane Yamaguchi next. 2 more semi-finals for Akane Yamaguchi, showing to me that she is refining her consistency. Now, for me, when it comes to Yamaguchi, she's in the same position. I said this about her at the last breakdown, is that she hasn't quite got that level to defeat the 3 players ranked above her, with that being Seung, Han Yue and Wang Ziyi, and I'd probably say, although she hasn't faced Chen Yufei in a while, she might also struggle against Chen Yufei as well. But what is good, and I still think that Akane Yamaguchi is on the rise, and the reason I say that is that while she isn't able to get these wins over a Wang Ziyi or a Han Yue or a Seung, she is beating the players below her easier and easier. She is getting through to the quarters that little bit more comfortably than she was at the beginning of the year. So for me, that's a sign that she is refining her form. And who knows, she might time it perfectly for the Worlds, where, let's not forget, she's actually in a position where she could match Carolina Marin's World Championship Women's Singles record with 3 titles. As Akane is a 2-time former champion, so she wins one more, she does match Marin's record, and it's not out of the realms of possibility that she could do that. It's going to take another step up in her level and definitely some luck, but I think she's definitely on the cusp of winning one of these semi-finals and getting through to a final. Once you're there, who knows what can happen. But I think Jill and Steen were also mentioning that they felt I keep saying that Akane Yamaguchi was kind of showing signs of good form, and I would agree. It's just not quite there to defeat the top 3, but she is definitely getting stronger. And like I said, you can see that when she plays players that are slightly ranked below her. Aaron Cha and So Yik, they had a surprise first round loss in Japan, but that was quickly eradicated by them making the final in China, backing up the great Asia leg they had not too long ago, where they won in Thailand. They got to the final of the Malaysia Masters and won the Singapore Open, so 3 back-to-back finals with 2 wins. So yeah, no, that was really, really good. And what also was good for them in China was that up until the final, where they were outclassed in the final, they were doing the same to everyone else that they played. Their semi-final against Ranki Reddy and Shetty was a masterclass, was really, really good. And I think this is just, although the final didn't go for them, it just wasn't their day, and Alfian and Fikri played really well. This is going to be difficult to overlook them, that they might be able to repeat what they did in 2022. Was it 2022? Yeah, it was 2022, sorry, when they won the world title, becoming Malaysia's first world champions. They could do it again. They're definitely going to be, I think, Malaysia's best hope for another world championship come Paris at the end of August. Zhang Bang and Wei Xin, they were the most consistent pair in the mixed doubles discipline, as they won in Japan and got to the final in China. So that's great consistency, and I think it's a great time for them to do it. As obviously, like I've mentioned countless times, we're not too far away from the World Championships, and ever since, say, the beginning of this year, then obviously they were split up, and then since reforming, both players have been struggling. Not performing particularly well, looking a little low on confidence, especially I think Zhang Bang, but Wei Xin also hasn't been playing particularly brilliantly. In terms of Zhang Bang, making far too many easy errors, just spraying shuttles left, right, centre, all the way out. And for me, Wei Xin is, when she's on it, probably the best front court player in mixed doubles, but hasn't been as dominant there, has been kind of beaten on a number of occasions. When they've lost, a lot of times it's the other female player that has dominated the front court, which is something I think, if you go back last year, because they won the Japan Open last year, that and even before then, that Wei Xin was always dominating the front court. But obviously in these 2 tournaments, they've gone back to how they were. Zhang Bang making less errors, Wei Xin dominating the net, and when they're playing really well, they're very difficult because Zhang Bang's got such a lethal attack. That guy, I call him the kangaroo boy to my wife, because he's just almost got, without any bend of the knee, he can just kind of spring across the net. It's almost like he's got Achilles tendons that must be 3 feet long. Absolutely ridiculous. I think even speaking to Christian Luque about him, he said physically he's the best player he's ever worked with, far better than Zheng Siwei when it comes to physicality. That's something, saying something. But Wei Xin, she rarely ever wants to be at the back, but she is so good at the front, and these 2 weeks, she has been absolutely sublime. In the kind of latter stages matches, she's been probably the most decisive factor. Now, I will say, when it comes to this pair, I do feel there is some gaps that can be exploited. And I think there's just some situations where they don't look as comfortable, and I think that's because of the way they play, and that because Wei Xin, whenever she's at the back, she spends no more than 1 or 2 shots there, she'll just run forward, and so I think when Zhang Bang's returning the serve, if you watch with other mixed pairs where the lady is a bit more comfortable at the back, or even if they are front court players, say like Wang Yachong, but she could take the rear court quite comfortably, Zheng Siwei had more options on the return. He could do the net shot if it's a good return. Sometimes that's the only option you've got. Or he could obviously push it and attack it. But with Zhang Bang, because he doesn't want to just net and stay back, he has to always try to do something, and they have to then rotate. And there's quite a few times where if the low serve is good to him, then the opponents can then put it straight over to the back or get Wei Yaxin to the back, and it kind of exposes them a little bit. Obviously, they are such a good pair; they're still able to kind of work around that. But it's for me, it's a something that can be exploited. You know, getting Zhang, and if you take that a bit further or open it out, obviously, if they're able to bring Zheng Bang in or get a situation where you push him up the court in a kind of tape or slightly below tape situation, it can leave some difficulty, but they're obviously able to counter that really well, mainly because Zhang Beng, like I said, he can leap, he can literally do a net shot and then just jump straight back. But still, I think that was obviously why I'm bringing this up as well, is because throughout these 2 weeks, it felt like they were a little bit more comfortable in those slightly awkward situations for them. They looked more organised and they covered each other a bit well, and combine that with the fact they both just looked a little bit more confident and looked good together, and that obviously that led to them overall playing some very good matches. Shi Yu Qi, and I want to kind of link them in with Liu Shengshu and Tang Ning, although that's men's singles and women's doubles, but these two, they went back to back. You know, Shi Yu Qi won Japan and China, and so did Liu Shengshu and Tang Ning. Liu Shengshu and Tang Ning were absolutely dominant throughout, and obviously they did really well in the last leg as well. They are the world #1 pair now, and there are pairs that can trouble them and do well against them and beat them, but overall they had a little, what you say, after they got to this final of the Olympic Games, and then they did really well winning some tournaments. After that, they were like really, really dominant, and then there was a little period where there were a few pairs that kind of seemed to have figured them out, but then obviously over the last 4 or 5 tournaments, they've kind of regained that dominance, and they're definitely going to be a pair that's going to be difficult to beat at the World Championships. Shi Yu Qi, for me, one thing, I think, you know, he is a fantastic player, and I think he's just reclaimed his world #1 spot deservedly. And for me, there was a couple of key performances, and I think the main one that I really want to talk about is actually the final in China, and that leads to the last player I'll talk about, but I'll get to him in a second. In that final, Shi Yu Qi played against Wang Zheng, a slightly unknown player, but a player who's having an absolutely brilliant tournament, and actually in the final played really, really well. But what really impressed me is that whilst this young kid was playing out of his skin, Shi Yu Qi was still playing well, but he played put in such a mature performance. You know, he didn't kind of get flustered when this young kid was getting a lot of net cords or was playing really good, almost unplayable attacks. Shi Yu Qi just gradually kind of worked himself into the match, and just, you know, he didn't panic. He knew that if he kept doing what he was trying to do, that in the long run, that would lead to the win, and that's exactly what happened. And he showed that in other matches as well throughout both weeks. You know, something that he showed a little earlier in the year and the end of last year as well. Just this kind of ability that no matter what was happening, he was able to find a way to win. And it must be noted for Shi Yu Qi that just like Seung and Kim Won-ho and So Seung-jae, he has obviously won 3 of the 4 Super 1000s, which is a fantastic achievement. But last player that I want to talk about in this section, it's obviously going to be its own section, is the guy that he beat in that China Open final, and that's Wang Zheng. Now, this guy, he's like 23 years old, I believe, so he's the same age as Li Shifeng, but whereas obviously Li Shifeng has been very well known and won some big titles, namely the All England, and is a household name in the badminton world, Wang obviously isn't as known. In fact, obviously I've seen him play and I've heard his name, but he hasn't really done anything. Obviously earlier this year he got to the final of the Thailand Masters, which he lost, but that's a Super 300, so getting to the final of a Super 1000 is a huge step up. And I'll be honest, in his early rounds, so in his first and second round, I watched his matches. I think he beat Naraoka, and then Lee Chao-hao, the guy that got to the All England final, he beat him, and I was watching him going, okay, this kid's in the course of the Super 1000, let's watch some more of his highlights, let's rewatch this. And obviously it's good, really, really good, but it wasn't blowing me away. I wasn't like, oh wow, this guy's really, really good. You know, he looked like some of the other Chinese players that I've seen. You know, he looked a bit like a mix between Liang Shi and Wang Hongyang. You know, hitting and moving a little bit like Liang Shi, maybe slightly stronger looking, a bit more sturdy, and kind of what's what then connected him to Wang Hongyang, quite attacking. But the more I watched him, though, I then watched his quarterfinal. Who did he play in the quarterfinal? I can't remember. Who was it? Oh yeah, no, it was Christo Popov. And it was when I watched that I was like, hang on a minute, this kid, I'm really, really enjoying this now. I'm seeing more. It was almost like as the tournament went on, the more I watched him, the more I started to really enjoy his game, and I started to see things that were just really, really impressive. Obviously, his net play was a huge thing. For me, his athleticism was absolutely fantastic. He genuinely did some stuff that made me go, what the fuck? There was one in the final where he did a defense off a cross-court smash against Shi Yu Qi, so his forehand. Shi Yu Qi cross-lifted it, and he went straight away, leapt, and hit a cross-court smash again, winner. And I was actually watching that from the airport as I was flying back from a holiday, and I actually shouted out, what the fuck, in the airport, and I had so many people look at me, but it absolutely blew my mind. Yeah, no, so has an incredible net game, and he has a really, I call a sharp smash. So like some players, there's a difference between a powerful smash and a sharp smash. So a powerful one would be like, say, a Li Shifeng. It's like, it just looks really, really kind of explosive. But when you watch Wang's smash, it just comes off the racket like a bullet. It's not a one that's like, poof, but it just like the crack of it is just absolutely phenomenal. But yeah, no, I said I compared him to Liang Shi and Wang Hongyang, but I think the style, the technique is a bit like Liang Shi, but he's a much stronger and much sturdier version. And a little bit like Wang Hongyang, but he's more put together. And although I compared those two in the early rounds, it wasn't until the latter rounds that I made that second kind of note, that I felt that compared to Wang Hongyang, he's more put together with a better defense, with a little bit more better game plan, a better way of approaching the game. Yeah, no, absolutely incredible player. I am really excited to see more of him. Now, I think when it comes to that, I'm not going to go here and go, yes, this guy is the future, because, you know, China has so many players. Men's singles is an incredibly tough discipline, and who knows what might happen. But I really hope we see more of him, because, yeah, and I'm not saying this just because he got to the final of the Super 1000, but the more I watched him, like I said, I haven't really seen too much of him before, so obviously this was my first real kind of time that I watched a lot of him, but the more I watched him, the more I liked watching him. It was weird, the first time I watched him I was like, it's just another Chinese player, like, it's good. You know, he's left-handed, he's got good skills, good attack, he moves pretty well, but what's special? But then, as I watched more and more matches, and as he was getting better as the tournament went on, I was just like, wow, okay, he's got that. Okay, he's got this. He's got that. And it was just more and more layers. His net play, like I said, was really good. His attack, incredibly sharp. I love the fact that he just wasn't afraid in any match. He went for it. Sometimes in his matches, he did let players in when he seemed to have the advantage, but then he would ultimately still win. So he didn't completely crumble. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see his development over the coming tournaments, and if he's able to kind of replicate this result. It's a bit like, for me, although he's a bit older because he's 23, but it's a bit like when you saw, like I said, Alex Lanier last year in Japan, those questions of, okay, this is a great result, it's kind of come out of nowhere, but what's he going to do next? Is he going to take this result and push on with it? Or is he going to fade or not really ever see this level that often? You know, we see plenty of men's singles players. I've already spoken about a few of the Chinese ones, but they're both good examples, especially Wang Hongyang. He's known as a player that can win a tournament, but then go through like 6 tournaments of first rounds. Is this Wang, Zheng, Xing going to be the same as that, or is he going to be a little more consistent? Could he be someone like Li Shifang and Shi Yu Qi? Could he be China's next lead star? We'll just have to wait and see on that. Let me know your own thoughts on that one. Okay, last thing I want to talk about before I get on to the Q&A is there's been, it's a bit of a not a sad one, but it's something that comes up time and time again. It's a bit like we've spoken about with Popov and the VAR call situation against Shi Yu Qi, and that one, obviously, whenever those situations with the umpire calls at the net, VAR also always comes up. So, we should have VAR, and I agree. The other one that has been coming up just as much is the whole conversation around the cold spray rule, and it reared its ugly head again at the China Open, and this happened in Kam In-hyuk and Ki Dong-ju's match. Who was it against? I can't remember actually who it was against and what round it was. It was the quarters, I think. Anyway, that's besides the point. Basically what happened, I think Kam In-hyuk was returning a serve or was moving to the front of the court and rolled his ankle incredibly badly. And obviously, as what usually happens, is he obviously wanted medical attention. The doctor came on, so did the tournament referee, because inevitably they're going to ask for cold spray, and the cold spray is not allowed, and there's going to be this whole lot of time wasting, and then the player will go on, and then everyone goes, at the BDRF against their players' welfare, against the athletes' welfare, etc., etc. All sides of this debate, I kind of can see. I understand where people are coming from in terms of the fact that, why aren't the players allowed to have the cold spray? This is a genuine case. I know the rule was brought in because there were a lot of people abusing it. They would just be like, say they were losing or they need a break, and they go, oh, my lower back, oh, my hamstring, and they get the doctor on. It'd give them like those few minutes to kind of get their breath back and to kill the momentum of their opponents, etc., etc. So obviously there was too many of those situations, so the BDRF brought in this rule, and obviously now then the flip side happens, because inevitably when a rule like this is brought in, it affects the genuine cases. We saw a number of those at the World Tour Finals last year. We've seen them throughout this year, and obviously this situation with Kam In-hyuk was a genuine one. I mean, his ankle was almost sideways. I hope it isn't anything too serious, because those kind of injuries, they can sometimes look bad but aren't too bad, and sometimes they don't look too bad and they can be bad. I just hope that it isn't too bad, and that obviously it doesn't affect him for the World Championships or further down the line. Now, for me, personally, I've said this before and I'll say it again, what I don't understand about this whole situation is players are allowed to ask to towel down, or they're allowed to ask to change their racket, or even put their grip powder if they've got towel grip, because it gets sweaty and that helps dry it out. They're allowed to do that at the umpire's discretion. Why isn't it the players aren't allowed at the umpire's discretion to spray themselves? You don't need to be a medical professional to apply that spray. Let's be honest here. You don't need a medical license to do that shit. So why can't players have cold spray in their bag? Can I cold spray quickly? The umpire can clearly, in this situation, it was right by the umpire. I have no doubt that the umpire knew it was bad, but the rule is that he can't allow them to do it because it's the rules. His hands are tied. Don't think anyone can kind of blame this on the umpire. I can see why they can blame it on BDRF for creating this rule, but if it was in the situation that I've just explained, the umpire can clearly see he's rolled his ankle and can go, yeah, pull your sock down, spray it on yourself, or have your partner do it, and then get on. Why do you need a doctor to come on to administer it yourself? Like I said to you, the only area that's difficult for, say, if you're a singles player, is to do the middle of your back. You would probably need someone to get that. But your ankle, your knee, you can spray that stuff yourself quite easily. And like I said, it can be at the for me, I don't see why this can't be a solution, because it will take no longer, unless you have to take your shoe and sock off, but even then that doesn't take too long, and players are still allowed to ask if they can rearrange their shoe or whatever, and umpires allow that to happen. So apart from that, it wouldn't add any more time on than, say, a towel down or a spray. It would allow umpires to say yes or no at the discretion. Although I would think that some umpires wouldn't want to say no, because if they say no and it turns out it was really bad, that's obviously not going to look good on them. They might be worried of the repercussions in that respect, but it would still give them the power. And in all honesty, this whole situation, these situations, time waste anyway. The whole thing, the BWF were trying to get rid of this rule because it was being utilized as a time-wasting tactic or to kill momentum. It's still doing that because players are allowed to call for the doctor. That rule hasn't been changed. But then the doctor comes on and it wastes actually more time, because then this whole conversation happens where the player goes, can I have a spray? And they're like, no. And then because the language barrier is never perfect, there's this whole back and forth. Why can't it? And it actually takes longer than it did before. So it's actually made the whole situation worse. Whereas if the umpire can go, okay, you want to do, the player goes, you still might need to have the doctor on to assess it, but then the player afterwards can go, can I quickly? And it's like, yeah. Why? I'm a little bit confused. I mean, other than that, scrapping the rule, I'm not sure whether that's the right decision, because we might go back to the situation where players do abuse the rule. So again, I understand why this rule's in place, but for me a solution is allow the players to carry cool spray in their bag, just like they would a towel or water or powder for their grip, and they can spray it on themselves. I know you can do it in a mid-game interval, but sometimes these situations happen at, say, 2 love, and how can you play on for potentially another 20 rallies before you can do it? If you've got a bad injury, it's just not going to happen. So yeah, for me, what I will last say is I have no doubt in this situation. Well, maybe some little doubt, I don't know. You can't say for sure, but the umpire probably knew it was bad, but their hands were tied because of the rule. So let's not put any blame on the umpires for situations like this. But I'd love to know your own thoughts on the cold spray. Do you think they should bring the rule back, or do you think maybe keep it as it is but apply what I'm saying? Or maybe there's another solution that I'm blatantly overlooking. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. So moving on, Q&A. Obviously there's quite a few questions. I've tried to pick out, I think I picked out 8. I'm not sure if I'll answer them all. We'll see, or I might not keep them all in the video because I don't want this going on for too long. But yeah, no, thanks for sending them in. Everyone sent in plenty of questions. There was plenty of ones that came up time and time again, and those ones I will definitely be answering. So the first one, why are there more ranking points offered by the China Open than other Super 1000s? Now, this is for a very simple reason, and it's actually linked to, there's actually something that's coming into effect in 2027, but it kind of, as you'll find out, it's already in effect now, is that if a tournament offers, I'm not sure if this is only at Super 1000s, but if a tournament offers more prize money, then as a result, more ranking points will be awarded. And China have, I think, the highest, out of the 4 Super 1000s, the highest prize money pool. So as a result, more ranking points are on offer. Next one, can Kunlavut defend his World Championship title with his current form / play style? I had a few questions about Vititsan, because obviously he became the world #1 before this thing, and then in Japan and China he didn't play particularly well. I think, what did he lose, first round or second round in Japan and second round in China? Which is obviously not what you'd expect from Olympic silver medalist, the current world champion, and the world #1. And so obviously naturally getting questions like this makes perfect sense. If he plays like he did in Japan and China, then no, he is most certainly not winning the world title. That's just a given. You can't play the way he did. He looked, in comparison to the previous leg of tournaments, the previous tour where he did obviously really, really well, he looked a little bit sluggish. He wasn't quite as attacking. His general shot quality was down. He didn't look, to be honest, he didn't look particularly motivated to play either, which was a little bit strange. I mean, that might not be the case, but that's just the kind of feeling that I got. I don't quite know the whole situation. Why? Maybe it was just 2 bad weeks for him. All players can have 2 bad weeks. Maybe he's trained through this because his eye is on the World Championships. I know that's still a month away, so he could have tried to do well at both, but maybe Vitisan is always someone that I'm pretty sure takes quite a while to peak for events, so maybe he's putting in some really hard training and is kind of semi-trained through this. I really honestly don't know, but in answer to the question, he can't win the world title with that current form. But I wouldn't say that he's incapable of turning it around, because, you know, the form he showed at the previous events was really, really good. You know, and obviously we know he's very capable. He is, when it comes to the World Championships, he's been able to get to the final of the last 2 editions. He got to the final of the Olympics. So obviously he knows what it takes, and he's got like the mental strength and the know-how to get to the final of these big tournaments, which I think is always in the majors, like the Worlds, a big factor, and I think it will be a factor again. I think if I had to go right now in terms of favourites within the men's singles, it is very difficult, but I'd always have Vitisan there, because I know that when it comes to these big events like the Worlds, that he, like I said, he knows how to do it, but he's going to have to turn it around a little bit, because he looked off. He looked very off. He just didn't look... Some people have said, was it the pressure of being the world number one? I'm not so sure. I don't know. He always strikes me as someone that pressure like that doesn't seem to get to him. I mean, it might do. He might be very good at hiding it. But, you know, having done a lot of videos on some of the top players, sometimes you do see before big wins come some rather poor results. I've seen that countless times. So maybe this is what will happen for Vitisan. We'll just have to wait and see when it comes to the world titles. Do you think Alex Lanier could be the number one day, and how long could it take? Well, to that first question, I do think he can. It's going to be very difficult because the men's singles is so tough, so deep. There's plenty of players, and whilst obviously Alex, I think, is capable of beating everyone in the world, can he do it enough to get high enough to be the world number one? That's a difficult thing. I do think he's definitely capable. He's definitely got the game plan. And I mean, let's not forget, I've already said this, but he's only been on the world tour like a year. I know he's been playing senior tournaments for far longer, but obviously if we count the Japan Open was kind of his breakthrough. I can't remember, he was playing before then, I know, wasn't he? But it was basically after the Olympics that he really got that chance to kind of play. So within 1 year, he's gone from, you know, just getting in because some players were missing to being seeded in like a Super 1000. So with that shorter progression, I know jumping from say number 8 to number 1 is a huge jump. But yeah, definitely capable. Definitely capable. How long could it take? How long's a piece of string, mate? To be honest, it could take him a year. It could take him 5-6 years. He might be someone that might get to world number 2, say like an Anderson, but then never quite able to make it to number 1 because just can't quite get that set of results, or another player comes along that is just above everyone else and you can never knock them off the top. There's too many variables to answer both these questions, but I will say that he's capable. He's got the work rate, you can see that. He's got the discipline, he's got a great team behind him. You know, the technology that France are using, the sports science they've got behind their thing is absolutely second to none, and you can see that in how well France are doing in general and the rise that they've had. And I think Alex is a special player. He's got that something special about him. I spotted it, or I saw it like so many others did from when he was 14, 15 years old and winning international series tournaments. So I think he definitely could be number 1. How long it could take, I don't know. But yeah, I haven't really got much else to say. Does Kim and So have a weakness? I've also answered this question, if I remember rightly. The weakness I mentioned was, but it's not a weakness that's explicit to them, because it's an area that can be exposed on any pair, that any pair is not going to be particularly good at, and that is if you can, basically in men's doubles, especially if you can win the net. I mean, if you can get from playing from below the tape, then obviously it's going to be a far trickier time, and if you can get them below the tape with very little time, that's even harder. For me, with Kim and So, I think what their weakness is actually against incredibly fast and attacking players, against fast and attacking pairs. You know, if I think back to the All England and He Jiting and Reng Shangyu played extremely fast, and I think Kim and So, because they're quite basic and you know, especially a Kim Won Ho, He's not like someone who can like kind of like. He is obviously very quick and very good, but it's not like, say that if you can break down that first, if you see his defense as one layer as defending out here, layer 2 would be off the body, but like a third layer would be like he's able to kind of do it off this and still play a good quality. In that third layer, he's not as good as a number of other players, and Seung Jae is quite good from there, but it's those kind of situations where the more skillful or the more naturally skillful, the kind of the Indonesian style or that kind of thing, they're able to still do things from those situations. So if you can get, when they come up against really fast players, I get the sense that Kim Won-ho can sometimes not be fast enough in the flat game or in the defensive game to do that. If you can break down, that's definitely a weakness. But the problem is that Kim Won-ho and Seung Jae are also very smart and calm, and they're able to kind of counter that, or to be able to play at fast enough speed to expose that weakness. It takes a lot out of a pair, and they have to not only play really fast and be able to maintain it, which is physically hard, but to actually just be consistent enough with it over the course of 2 or even 3 games is really, really difficult to do, and very, very difficult in that All England I talk about. Obviously, the Chinese pair weren't able to maintain it. So yeah, no, I think if there's any sort of weakness, I do think it's against extremely fast-playing pairs. But they also have to be very consistent with it. I know that's kind of like, that sounds like an obvious response. But yeah, if you can't play fast enough against Kim and So, or get them to take the shuttle low enough at the front of the court, then you're not going to beat them. That's just, for me, plain and simple. I'll answer this last one, actually, because I think this one's quite a good one. What's happened to Liang Weikang and Wang Chang? They seem to have lost their magic after the Olympics. Now, I've got this question quite a lot about Liang and Wang. Almost in every breakdown, I think, since the Olympics, actually. People are going, oh, they're not as good, they're in a slump, and all this kind of stuff. And for me, I'll start by saying they're still a very good pair, and I think I said this in the last breakdown. All they need is 1 or 2 really good results. I mean, in China they got to the semi-finals, and I thought they actually played pretty well. I thought that actually Liang Weikang played some of the best badminton I'd seen of him for a long time. I think even it's been a while since I've watched them play when Steen Pedersen's been commentating, and I've heard Steen go, wow, that's fantastic. It's been a while since I've seen him say that about Liang Weikang. I've heard him say about Wang Chang. In fact, I've seen him say about Wang Chang how he's kind of, the reason why he falls apart is because he has to make up for Liang Weikang a little bit too much, and that leaves him exposed or ends up having him try too hard. So that was interesting. That gave me an indication. I was kind of thinking as well, I was thinking they did still lose, because they lost to Alfian and Fikri. Alfian and Fikri, like they did to pretty much everyone, won those matches quite comfortably. But there were signs within it that I felt that Liang Weikang was actually playing some pretty good stuff, and Wang Chang was being Wang Chang. So yes, they do seem to have lost their magic after the Olympics. Where they got to the final. I heard again Jill and Steen constantly bringing up post-Olympic slump, but now it's been well over a year, and they should be over it now, or it shouldn't be that much of a factor. But I don't know. For me, with Liang and Wang, clearly when the Chinese switched their partners, that turned out to not be the best thing. That didn't last particularly long. No, I think what I'll say about Liang Weikang and Wang Chang is that, yes, I would agree that they've lost their magic. They have been struggling for quite some time now. But there were some glimpses. There were some signs, I think, in the China Open that, there's some signs they're coming back. Now, that's mainly from Liang Weikang, if I'm being honest with you, because there's been a few matches earlier this year where they have lost, but they've lost closely to, say, like Kim and So, or to other pairs, when they've been like, had they won those matches, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. I probably wouldn't be answering these questions. So they're quite close. I think it's because we do expect a lot of them, because they got to the Olympic final, because in the early stages of their career they did so well, and so this slump is quite a contrast to that. But they're still a fantastic pair, and I think they have been close quite a few times. If they can get over that hurdle, just once or twice, I think that might turn their fortune around. I think there's a lot of men's doubles pairs actually in this boat that it's going to take maybe 1 or 2 results to kind of really turn around the season. I spoke about Aaron Cha and So Yik in the last one, that before that leg, a lot of people were kind of doubting them after their result at the All England and how they played a little bit in the period afterwards. Obviously there was some injury issues as well, but then they went and did really well, and in Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore, and obviously have backed up again in China. And suddenly, people's opinions of them have turned back to good again. So it can definitely happen for any pair or any player that's been at the world's best. They can turn it around like that. We can suddenly change our opinion of them, and I think Liang Wang are no different. And I would say that until this tournament, I wasn't seeing that many signs. I was seeing good signs from Wang Chang, but not Liang Wei Kang. But actually in this China Open, I saw some good signs, especially compared to the last leg, where I think in the last breakdown I talked about how they played almost like they didn't really have a clue of what they were doing. There was no game plan. They were just hitting shuttles over the net. That definitely had changed. So for me, it's definitely turning around. That might have been the fact they were playing on home soil. They probably were a little bit more spurred on and they wanted to do well in front of their home crowd. But I'm going to remain positive, and it will be interesting to see them at the World Championships. I could see them either crashing out very, very early or getting into the medals, if not getting into the final. I think they're going to be someone, I don't think they'll lose in the quarters. I'll have to think about this more. Don't count me on this now, because I am going to do a video previewing the Worlds. But my gut feeling is they're either going to crash like first round and it'll be like a disaster for them, or they're going to get in the medals. I don't think there's going to be some in between, like second round or quarter final. I think it's going to be all or nothing, basically. So that is it, everyone. I've spoken for quite some time. I said this wasn't going to be a long episode, but I've inevitably spoken on for far too long, as I always do. I do apologise for the fact that this has been a combined episode, that I didn't do the Japan Open and China Open separately, but I hope you understand I was on holiday, and the way my schedule worked, my wife's schedule and everything worked, that this just turned out to be the best time of year for me to go, and it coincided with those 2 tournaments. So I do apologise, and obviously as a result I've had to condense things. I did try to quickly gloss over quite a lot of stuff, especially the honourable mention section, I guess you could call it. So like I said at the start, if you think there's anything I've missed out, then add it in the comments. If it's a question you think I could answer or you want to ask me, also put that in the comments and I'll do my best to answer that. Before I leave you, obviously, again, if you want to buy any Beckman's Breakdown merchandise, the link is in the description. And I'll just give you a quick update on videos that are coming up, because it's been a very quiet July for me. Again, holiday. But August is going to be a busy month, because obviously this episode will be coming out. I've just filmed last night. I recorded my daddy's documentary. That was 3.5 hours of me talking. That should give you an indication of how long the video is going to go. It's going to be close to 3 hours long. So I hope you're ready for that one. And I hope you support it, because it's bloody taken me months. It's going to be the longest video ever. But it's going to be really, really good. I'm really, really excited for that. Like I said, literally not too long ago, I will also be doing a World Championship preview video. Obviously I'll do a Beckman's Breakdown on the World Championships, and I'm also going to be starting a new series, basically where I'll be it's going to be a way for me to kind of create some slightly shorter episodes. They'll be more polished, so I'm going to still going to have my Beckman's Breakdowns. I'm going to have some biographies like the Daddy's one, which will be going to be much longer, generally 2 hours, etc. So really kind of 1 or 2 of those a year. And I also want to do kind of behind the badminton, I guess you could call it. The title's still up in the air, but where I look at maybe 1 or 2 matches, a bit like the All England Finals video I did. Similar to that, but not just All England Finals, but badminton matches in general. I think that could be a really cool thing that will have slightly shorter videos, but still packed with information and stuff that I can get out to you a little bit more. So hopefully with everything that I'm doing, with that added onto my breakdowns and the badminton biography stuff, there's going to be something on this channel for absolutely everyone. So yeah, though, that's a quick update from me. Last thing I can say is thank you for watching, especially if you've made it this far. I really appreciate the people that do watch all of these videos or listen to them on YouTube. And I'll see you in the next one. See you later, everyone.